Hello, good morning, and welcome to today's webinar with Safe Software. So today we're going to be walking you through some tips and tricks for using FME for working with your business intelligence data. But first, let's start with some introductions. So my name is Laura Wu, and I'm a member of the FME experts team here. I usually focus on our server product, but I also get to work with some fun things like business intelligence and data visualization, which is our topic for today. And with me, my co-presenter here, I'll let her introduce herself.
I'm Liz Sanderson, and I'm an engagement specialist with the community and knowledge team, so the entire community base.
There we go.
So about business intelligence. So business intelligence kind of takes your data and visualizes it to get some quick answers to all of your questions. So to do this, you use some business intelligence tools like Power BI, Qlik, Tableau, and even sometimes Excel if you put some charts and graphs into it. So we're going to create some interactive data visualizations to allow your business to answer some questions and ask questions and answer those questions for your data-related needs.
Yep. There we go.
So if you have any questions today, please feel free to chat them into the GoToWebinar control panel, and some of our experts will be there to answer them for you. And if we have any time at the end, we'll live chat them out loud and answer some more questions.
Yeah, so we've got Trent and Xiaoming also from our experts team here today. So they'll be answering your questions as you go, and yeah.
So some of the topics we'll cover today, connecting to data with FME, some data cleanup, some data joining, enriching your data, and then adding location to all that.
So the focus for today will really be on the data preparation step. So that's kind of where FME can come in and help you as you work on your data flows. So why bother with your data prep to start? So in an ideal, perfect world, I guess, all of your data is in the same format, all the column names are perfect, easy to read, and all the values are correct and don't have any errors in them. But unfortunately, we don't live in that kind of a world these days. So your data is never going to be ready to use right away necessarily. So to start, your data won't always be clean. So there'll always be problems. You'll have maybe user entry problems. Your address fields may not line up quite the right way. Your zip codes or postal code values might not be standardized the way you want them to be. So you need to be able to find those issues and clean them up and make that better. Your data is not always going to be consistent as well. So I know with a lot of the business intelligence tools out there, they have really good tools for being able to blend and join your data sets together, which is great if your data is consistent enough for those joins to work. So if you have a common ID and your column names line up properly. So you do need to make sure that your data is in that consistent state, so it is easy to merge them together and find where the data relates to each other. And then data format, that's also a common problem. So you usually get your data from a lot of different sources, especially in the business world. You've got things like Salesforce, you've got Excel spreadsheets, CSV files, some obscure text format where you have to go through and scrape all the data that's in there. So you'll really need to be able to connect to your data source wherever it happens to be and bring it into a format that you can use within your tools. And then finally, being able to automate that process to avoid mistakes. So it's easy to go in there and open every single spreadsheet as you go and fix up all of those errors manually. But it does take a lot of time, and there's a lot of potential user error there. So if you're fixing up your address fields, maybe you type Avenue instead of AVE or something like that. So definitely helps to be able to create a process that is easily repeatable so that you'll always get the same results on your data sets. So just for those who are fairly new to FME, we'll do a quick intro to what it's all about. So FME is a software product that basically allows you to work with your data. So you can connect to your data sets in whatever format they happen to be in. We have support for, I think it's over about 400 different data formats.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, so we can connect to all those. We support quite a range of data types. So everything from a text file to CSV, all the tabular data sets, Excel, to more advanced data sets, Esri-based ones, databases, you name it. We've got
AutoCAD.
Minecraft here,
Yeah.
AutoCAD data, like a little bit of everything. So you can bring it all together into one place so you can work with your data all together. So it also provides quite a range of data transformation tools. We call these transformers within the FME world. And those basically let you perform operations on your data set. So it'll let you rename columns, merge data together, do spatial joins, and all of that. And the bonus here is there's no coding required. So FME itself is kind of a drag and drop visual interface. So you can just drag in the different pieces, all your different data sets and all your different transformation tools, put them together into a single workflow so you can see it all together. So if anyone's interested, we've got this link down at the bottom, safe.com/howitworks. There it is. So it's a good overview of what FME is all about if you're interested there. So we'll just start with a little bit of terminology basics. I'll talk about this a bit more once we get into a demo, as it's kind of hard just to see words on the screen. But on the left-hand side here, we have kind of the FME terminology, and on the right-hand side, kind of the equivalent in the Excel world. So just to kind of help orient you. So when we talk about feature types, we really mean sheets, so the individual kind of pages inside an Excel file, for example. This could also be a table if you're working with a database. When we talk about attributes, these would be the column names in your data. Individual features are each of the rows, so each of the individual data points within your data set. And then when we say transformers, as I mentioned before, these are the data transformation tools. So this is what kind of operates on your data sets to change them. So for the purposes of this webinar, we've got a little scenario that we'll work through just to make it kind of easier to follow what we're up to. So in our scenario today, we're going to be analyzing data about movie filming locations in New York City. So we've got this data from the New York City Open Data website, as well as another site there, the Numbers. So we're going to be able to bring in this data, and we're going to clean it up and reformat it so that we can work with it in our BI tools to really get a good feel for where all the popular movies were filmed in the city of New York. So I don't know, maybe if we plan to visit sometime, we can know where to go to find all those good scenes from our movies out there. So we'll start with a demo here to begin. So I'll just show the basics of connecting to your data sets with FME. So we're going to start out slow here and just kind of work our way up. So I'll just show the very basics of the FME interface and what it looks like when you are connecting to your data. So I'm going to swap over to our application now. So this is FME Workbench. This is the application where you would be creating your workflows to connect to your data sets and clean up your data set, or clean up your data, modify columns, attributes, and all of that. So the data set that we're working with today, I have that open here, is in an Excel spreadsheet. So this is from the City of New York's Open Data site. And it just shows different filming location or different movies and where certain scenes were filmed in the city. So the spreadsheet has film name, and additional information about the movie itself, as well as the latitude, longitude location of where in the city a particular scene was filmed. So we've got this one here at the New York County Courthouse, this latitude, longitude, somewhere in Lower Manhattan. So what we want to do is read in this data set and maybe clean it up a little bit before we import that into one of our business intelligence tools. So I'm going to use FME to do that. So if I go back into Workbench here, I'm just going to create a brand new workspace. I'm going to connect to that data set to bring that in. So the first step in any workspace is to add a reader. So I'll add that up at the top. This is just a connector to my data, my source data set. So I can decide what format I want to connect to. So I'll just show briefly, this is the list of data formats that FME is able to read in from. So it's kind of worth scrolling through here at some point just to get an idea of what kind of data FME can work with and what maybe we can help you with if you've got data hiding out there that you need to be able to work with yourself. So for here, I'm just going to connect to Excel, so the Microsoft Excel format. I'll locate my data set. Just my first demo here, interactive map data. I'll open that up. So I'm going to click on the parameters just to see how FME is interpreting this. So we notice at the top here we have sheets to read, and there are 3 listed. So if I look at my spreadsheet here, I see that I have 3 sheets down below. So I've got something with notable directors, as well as items with no location. So I don't care about these sheets so much. I just want the full map list. So I'll just bring that into my workspace. So I'll uncheck the other 2 and just keep the full map list there. The other thing I'll notice here is in the preview, highlighted in bold at the top, are what FME is going to interpret as the column names. So I see scenes from the city, locations, and then they're all B, C, D, and E. But then in row 3 here, I have what actually looks to be the column names. So film, year, encoded name, and all that. So I'll need to tell FME to get the column names from row 3 instead of row 2. So I can do that at the top in my field names row. Switch that to 3. And then this updates to show what FME is going to bring that in as. The other thing I'll check here when connecting to my data is the attributes. So these are each of the columns inside that spreadsheet. And then FME's taken a guess or has scanned the spreadsheet and kind of found the column types that are inside there. So it's kind of setting these to good defaults based on the data that's inside. And I'll see right here under my latitude and longitude, FME's automatically bringing that in as X and Y coordinates. So that's perfect. So I can read in the spreadsheet and see where those locations are as points. My final step here will be to set the coordinate system. So FME can't look at the Excel spreadsheet and automatically guess what coordinate system these are in. So I'll just set that so it knows. So it's a latitude and longitude. And there we go. So I've got what we call a feature type here, which corresponds to that sheet name. So if I expand the list of attributes, I can see the full list of columns from that data set. So this is what how FME is displaying how it sees the schema of my data set. So if I right-click here and add an inspector, let's take a look at the data to begin. So I'm going to run my workspace, which will connect to that spreadsheet, and then it's going to open that up in the second application in the FME software suite, the FME Data Inspector. This basically gives me a view of the data as FME has interpreted it. So I can see at the bottom is my list of movies and all the information from that spreadsheet. And at the top here is that map view showing the latitude, longitude points overlaid on the city of New York here. So I can see where each of those locations, those filming locations are found. So that's great. So it's a good start there. Get that out of the way, and I'll go back to Workbench. One thing I'll point out here is on the connection. You see I have this number, 233. This number represents the number of features or the number of rows that FME read in when it connected to that spreadsheet. So it found 233 records inside that Excel spreadsheet, and it's brought all those in. So it's a good way to see what's going on inside your workspace, so you know how many features are going through every connection as you go. So for this example, I'm just going to do some very simple changes. So I noticed there's a lot of extra information in here, like the URL encoded name and some kind of book image thing that I don't really care about that much. I just care about the film name mostly. So I'm going to adjust the schema for my output. So I'm going to add a transformer. So it's a transformation tool to change that. So I have the attribute manager. I'm going to drop that into place. So Liz is going to show a little bit more about the transformers in FME. I'll just show one example to begin here. So in here, I can open up the settings, and this will let me manage all the different attribute or column names inside my data set. So I can come in here and say, okay, I don't want that URL encoded name. I'm also not a fan of having, say, the client or book indicator number. So this data set came from some sort of tourism book, I guess. And we'll just delete all of those that we don't like there. And I can also rename some of these. So maybe I don't like having director/filmmaker name. I can just leave that as director name and director IMDb link. And then I'll leave the rest as they are. So that's a pretty good start. Well, maybe I don't want that link as all caps, so I'll change that as well. Link, there we go, that's better. And I'll say OK. And then if I expand the list of column names, you see the list is shorter now. So I've removed some of those columns that I don't care about and I don't need. So my final step here, since this is just a simple data transformation, is I want to create an output now. So I want to write this out to a file with the changes in it. So under writers here, I'm going to add a writer, which will be an output from my workspace. And then I can write this out to any format that FME supports. So I have quite a list to choose from, but I'll just keep it simple and I'll write this back out to an Excel file. So I'm importing an Excel file and I'm creating a simplified one on the output. So I'll call this my output file. So you see it's not in that folder as it is. Save that. For my sheet definition, this is how FME is going to create columns in my output. I could say copy from reader, but then I'd end up with an identical copy of what my input was. So I'm going to set this to automatic for now. And I'll say OK. And I'll show you what happens there. So the first thing I'll have is I get to decide what the sheet in my output Excel file will be called. And I can call this filming locations. And I can leave everything else at their default values. I want to output field names in my data set, so I'll leave that as yes. Then I'll say OK. Then I can connect this into my workflow. So once I connect that up, you see all the attributes populate in that output. And you see it's just the attributes that I wanted and not the ones that I don't care about. I can come in here as well and change the attribute types if I wanted to. So I could switch this to manual and change these if needed. So if there's some number formats that I think should be strings or something like that, I can adjust those. And then since I'm connected up now, I'll run my workflow. And this time it'll create the output as defined. So if I use this little shortcut and go to my output folder, which popped up on the wrong screen, I can see I've got my output file here created today at about 8:20. And I'll open that up. And there we go. So I've got my simplified Excel spreadsheet now. So it's only got the columns that I wanted in my output. And I can see the column names are on row 1 this time as well. So just a nicer, cleaned up version of my data there. So it's a very basic example of connecting to a data set in FME and doing some changes and creating an output from there. So demo recap, so we just saw the how to add a reader inside FME. We saw some simple data structure changes. The data join we're going to save for later, so we'll ignore that for now. And then we saw how to create an output data set. So the one thing I forgot to cover here is saving that workflow. If I go back to FME, so now that I've defined this workflow here, I can save this as an FMW file. And then I can open this up and rerun it at any time. So if I get a new list of filming locations for the new year, I can simply import that data and run through the same process to clean it up and create that same output again. So it's nice I can create a process that's now repeatable for any of my new data sets. OK, so over to Liz now.
I'm just going to change the screen here.
Yes. Switching up the presenter so we can see what she has to show about data cleanup now. There we go. Excellent. Perfect.
So yeah, I'm going to talk about data cleanup. So in the next demo, I'm going to show how to change attribute types, do some date time formatting, some simple calculations, filtering your data, and then joining the database. So over to FME. I've already created this workspace because it's a little more complex. So I have a CSV file, which is a movie budget file, which contains information about the movie name, the release date, the production budget, the domestic gross, and the worldwide gross. So if I just open that up here, you can get a feel for what it is. So it's a CSV file, so all my values are separated by commas. I've got the release date, the name of the movie, some Some has production budget, most don't. And then the domestic gross and the worldwide gross. So bringing that into FME, I'm going to do some DateTime Cleanup. So I really like to format all my dates before I do anything because sometimes you're not sure if it's a month or a date. And so I want to make sure my data is consistent throughout all of my workflows. So I'm just going to transform the data so it's year, month, day using the DateTime converter. And then if you're ever trying to figure out how to format your date, there's a great quick reference. So you can get into that a little bit better. So I have, And then I'm going to extract the year from my date because I have quite a few movies with the same title. So Godzilla, as seen in here. So there's quite a few Godzillas. I want to make sure I get the 1998 Godzilla. So I'm just going to extract the year so that I can join on the movie name and the year. So using the database joiner, I'm going to join with the Excel file that Laura just used. So using my movie and my year from my CSV file, I'm going to join with the film name and then the year from the Excel file. And then I'm also going to bring in some attributes from that Excel file. So I'm going to bring in borough, some spatial data, the director film name, and the location display text. And then my data contains quite a few duplicate names. So there's quite a few Godzillas filmed in multiple locations within New York City. So I'm just going to remove all of the duplicates. I only need one Godzilla. It doesn't really matter what filming location it was. I just need one title. So I can join my data later in Qlik and not have multiple movie names. And so in my CSV data, there is all my numerical values have $signs and commas, which makes it a string value. So unfortunately, FME can't handle that quite well, but I can remove those $signs and commas really simply, and then turn it into a numerical value. So I'm just going to use the string replacer to remove the $sign and the comma and replace them both with nothing. So now FME recognizes this as a number. Just going to use the attribute manager to remove some of the extra features that the extra attributes that the database joiner brought in. And then using an expression evaluator, I'm going to create a new value called international gross, which is the domestic gross minus the worldwide gross. So I could do this equation using the attribute manager, but I just wanted to highlight that you can use the expression evaluator as well. Then I'm just going to sort all my data out using the sorter transformer, sorting by worldwide gross, numeric descending value. I'm going to write this all out to an Excel file. And then now that it's written out to an Excel file, I can open it up in any of my business intelligence tools. And so for this example, I'm going to use Qlik. So this is Qlik Sense. So I've already created a dashboard. Oh, I gotta just log in here. My movie budget dashboard. There we go. So I've created this dashboard using my domestic gross, or my gross output Excel file. And so I have this pie chart in the top corner here. So it's by domestic gross and neighborhood. So each of my neighborhoods, you can see very visually how much of the full percentage of the gross value it brought in. And then I have a chart, or a table, excuse me, broken down by neighborhood, the domestic gross, the international gross, and worldwide gross. And then there's a bar chart explaining all the neighborhoods and how many films were filmed in that neighborhood. So there is over 6 films filmed in Midtown, and which makes sense because now Midtown has the highest domestic gross. So really quickly, you can see your data in a whole bunch of different ways and analyze it quite quickly. So over here, I have a stacked bar chart with domestic gross and international gross. And you can see that Spider-Man has brought in equal amounts from both international and domestic gross. Without even having to read any numbers, I can see that very quickly. So the great thing about these business intelligence tools is you can filter data really quickly on the fly. So if I wanted to see information about Crocodile Dundee, I'd click it, and all of my dashboards change to reflect that. So I can see it was filmed in Midtown. It brought $174 million in domestically, no international gross. It was filmed over on 5th Avenue. And I can add a bunch of different movies at the same time if I wanted to compare values. So all these business intelligence tools is great for that. And everything is interactable. So I can click over here and change things. Just remove these values. I can see all the things filmed in Upper West Side or Soho and so on.
Yeah, there's an amazing amount of power in these. Like once you have the data kind of ready to go and these dashboards created, like anyone can come in and see what's going on and get a really good idea for the trends and understand the data. It's much better. Yeah.
And you can upload this to the cloud and pass it on to a coworker so they can visualize everything. So yeah, so just some additional data cleanup transformers that I didn't get to cover. There's the Null Attributemapper, which is really good for changing all your null values, your empty values, your missing values into one value, so you know that it's a null or a missing or an empty value. String case changer, if some values, as you can see the back in the demo here, we have longitude and latitude are all uppercase. I can run those through a string case changer, and change them to camel case or all lowercase if I wanted to. The attribute filter, I can filter by different attributes, and then it exports, creates different output ports for any of the filtering if I'd like. So then I can do different analyses on different outputs. And the attribute rounder is really good for dealing with numerical values if I wanted 2 decimal places or no decimal places. So some other common data validation and cleanup tools in FME. So there's over 450 different transformers, which is quite daunting when you're trying to figure out what to do and how to manipulate your data. So the FME Transformer Gallery on safe.com is a really good resource to kind of figure out more information about your transformers. So say you're trying to find some more string transformers, you can filter by strings, you can just type in string and it'll pop up different transformers. And the Transformer Gallery is also embedded into FME. So, excuse me, you can use it quickly on the fly. It's just one of the little panes that you can open up. And then there's also the knowledge base. So likely somebody has already asked a question about a particular transformer, or we've written an article about it. And so you can find more information or some use cases for those transformers. So now that we've cleaned up the data, we can enrich it. We can do more things with it. So I'm going to bring down a complete website, extract the little parts of it, and then create an image from that website and put it into an Excel spreadsheet, all using FME. Oops. So for my second demo, so I'm working with that filming location data set from New York again. And then I'm going to extract a website from the Internet Movie Database, do some manipulation to it, and then write it out to another Excel file to put into Power BI, which will be the business intelligence tool for this tutorial. So in my filming location data set, I have this Internet Movie Database link. So using an HTTP caller, I can use that link and bring down all of the HTML from the website and put it into an attribute called response body. So what that looks like in the Data Inspector is this is the entire web page all into a single attribute, which is really handy. So now I can extract little parts of it without having to reload all of that. So what that looks like, so this is the website itself. So I have breakfast at Tiffany's, and now I really want to extract this movie poster from all of my movies and turn it into an image to put into my Excel file. So to find what that looks like, I'm just going to right-click on the image, use Inspect, and then use the Developer Tools within Chrome or Internet Explorer, or whatever your browser is. And so it'll highlight the image itself. And so I really want this link, the image link. But to make it a little bit easier myself, I'm just going to extract this div class poster because it's an easier CSS selector to handle with. It's a little more finicky if you're trying to break it down all the way down to the image, but I can use FME to break this down further. So I'm going to use the div class poster back in FME and use the HTML extractor. So I have the response body, which had all the HTML in it. And then I'm going to create a new attribute called poster and then use the CSS selector dot poster, so div class poster. And what that looks like in the data inspector is, so now I only have a small section of my HTML. So this is just the entire image link itself. And now I'm going to extract this image link. So using a bit of regular expression and the string searcher, I'm just going to extract just the HTTP link all the way up to the .jpeg, write it to an attribute called movie poster, and now I have my movie poster URL link. So I'm going to be able to put this into Microsoft Excel, I have to create a couple Excel specific attributes. So my poster is going to be 200 pixels by 200 pixels. I've created these attributes, and I'm going to use the image fetcher to bring that all together and put it into the Excel file. For more information on this, there's a great tutorial for writing images to an Excel spreadsheet in the knowledge base. It goes into a lot more detail on how to do this. Just because we're pressed for time, I'm just going to send you off to that. So now that we've created the image in Excel, just going to do some simple data cleanup. In the Excel file, there was some tags in the location text. Just going to remove that with the string replacer. So that's what that would look like. Just removing it, replace that with nothing. I'm going to, some of my years have like 1999 dash another year. I just want the first year. So I'm just going to extract the first year just like I did in the other tutorial. And then just clean up some of my attributes with the attribute manager and then write that all up to Excel. So Excel kind of takes the movie poster and kind of stacks it on top of each other. So I don't really want that. I want the movie poster within its own cell. So what that would look like. So if I just wrote it out to Excel, this is kind of how it looks. So now the movie posters are stacked on top of each other. They're not in their own sort of cell spaced out nicely. So to do that, I've created just an empty template Excel file called movie posters-template. And I've just made my cell spacing. So all my cells are 200 pixels by 200 pixels. And then I've used, within my writer, so my movie posters writer, I have the template file. And so now I've just added that blank template file. And now writing to that my movie posters Excel file, the format, it's nicely formatted. So now all my movie posters are within their own cell. And it's nicely spaced out. So now that it's written out to Excel, I'm going to bring it into Power BI. So this is Power BI. I've already created my dashboard. So what that Excel file looks like within Power BI is just basic text, and then I have the image link. So it doesn't read the image file itself. It just reads in the link. But using within Power BI, you can create that link and tell Power BI that it is an image URL. So from here, highlight your cell or your column, go to modeling under data category, then change it to an image URL. You can also do this for a web URL, but an image URL. And now Power BI will use that link within my dashboard to make it a picture. I've also brought in the movie gross total from my previous tutorial and linked them together using the movie and the film as the common field. So this is the dashboard. So I have the international and domestic gross for all the films, a nice little display of all the movie posters, some more information, what neighborhood and the borough, and the exact location of where each film was filmed. And then some more information on this chart over here, or table over here, about the director and the year. So now I can, just like in Qlik, I can click on whatever one I would like to analyze. So let's find one that has, there we go. So we have some international gross and domestic gross. Here's the movie poster. It was filmed in Central Park, South Manhattan. And this is who directed it. So I can also click on multiple and analyze them together. But this is just my data that I have domestic and international gross values for. Some of my data I don't have values for. So I can control that on this side over here. So I can change this. And as you can see, the chart doesn't change. It only reflects the values completely. So there, overall of all my movies, there's 45% international gross and 54% international gross. So if I was to acquire another spreadsheet with the rest of these values, I can easily add that into here. So that kind of sums up Power BI. So just some more international, or some additional enhancement transformers. So there's the change detector. It's really good for if you have two files and you're really not sure what's changed, you can run it through the change detector and FME will tell you what has changed. Things were added, that they were deleted or left unchanged. The attribute value mapper is good for like determining like high, medium, low values and outputting them in different attributes, or hot, cold, warm, or things like that, or even adding color to your different values. The statistics calculator is kind of what it sounds like. You can do basic statistics, summary, complete, cumulative statistics of all your data. And then the UUID generator is great for creating primary keys for all your data. So if you're looking to figure out how to join your data together, you can use that. Pass it back to Laura. Oops.
Okay.
Presenters.
We'll just have that slightly awkward moment while we switch the presenter here in the GoToWebinar. Oh,
I got you.
Okay, there we go. Thanks. Perfect. So just go with my screen here. Awesome. Okay. So we kind of, in those examples there with Liz, we just kind of looked at some of the most common tools, I guess, for data preparation and data validation type workflows. So those are super important when kind of working with any kind of business intelligence data. If your data is not clean, you're not going to be able to create visualizations that work quite as nicely as those. One thing I'll mention with the outputs there, so you were writing to Excel for each of those?
Yeah.
So
you can write to anything.
Yeah, I think with those two tools, Qlik and Power BI, they both support, and Tableau as well, they all support kind of a good range of different types of data formats that they can ingest. So Power BI definitely works well with Excel.
You can also bring stuff in from like Salesforce and Azure and even Google Drive. So it doesn't have to be on your machine.
Okay. Yeah, so that's good. So you can connect directly to those data sets and data sources so that when FME kind of comes into play there, you can work with those directly where your data is, clean it up, make sure it's in a good structure for those visualizations to work well. So the last little section here is we'll just talk about kind of location. So with a lot of these Power BI or a lot of these BI tools, they all have support for some kind of mapping interface as well. So having that location definitely helps provide spatial context for your visualizations. We saw in a couple that Liz showed there, they had points just showing the locations of those filming areas. So we can kind of look at kind of taking location to the next level as well. So helping to answer that question of where as part of your visualizations. So I've got a demo here, and I'll just switch over to FME for this. So I've got a workspace that I created here. I'll start with a simple one. So this is just a very basic example where our data is almost ready to use as we want it, but it's not quite there. So we're going to adjust it a little bit. So for my examples, I'm going to work with Tableau, just to kind of show the spectrum of the kind of the three biggest BI tools that we're aware of and kind of have some experience with. So for this one, I've got a shapefile that I got from the City of New York's open data site showing the areas of all the boroughs in New York City. And what I want to do is be able to create a visualization where I can group my filming locations based on those boroughs. So I do have one problem. So in this data set, let me open that up so I can show you. Oh, I'm not showing my screen.
You are. Never mind.
Oh, okay.
Sorry,
We're good.
I'm on the wrong thing.
No problem. So this is my data set here. Let me turn off that transparency. More opaque. There we go. So you can see those areas. So this is the data set. So it shows the five main boroughs in New York City and their names here. So if I look at my Excel spreadsheet that I want to work with to join, oops, let me get that again, my full movie list. So this one has the borough names inside. So if I go over here to my L column, you can see each of the boroughs is listed Manhattan, Queens. So it's perfect. So I have a column that I can use to link these two data sets. But there is a little bit of a problem here. If I look here at the Bronx, so we see what it's called there. But in my borough data set here, it's simply called Bronx. So if I tried to do a join directly on these two fields, nothing in the Bronx is going to match up because one says the Bronx and the other one is just Bronx. So I need to clean that up before I can create good visualizations to link these two. So this is a bit of a simplistic example. There are other cases where you'd actually see a field that might be common between the two that doesn't match up at all. So you need to kind of remap the values inside those. Or in some cases, you may not even have this field at all. So you might actually just have those points but not have the borough name in the other data set. So there's no way to link them unless you do a spatial join. So we'll look at that coming up as well. So in this case, I can just do a simple join between these because I have a common field. But since the fields aren't quite perfect, I need to do a little bit of change to make this work. So I can use my attribute value mapper transformer to fix that up. So if I open this up, I can look at my borough name from my shapefile there. And basically, I can do mappings for the different values inside that column. So in this case, if I find the value Bronx, I want to switch that to the Bronx to match my other data set so I can do a proper merge. This transformer I find is really powerful, especially when you're dealing with data sets that maybe have coded domains or maybe have different ways of representing the same value or possibly mistakes. So if you want to do kind of a little bit of manual mapping to fix those up, this is a great one to do that with. You can also import a list of values from another data set. So if you've got, say, a list of 1 to 50 codes, and then you want to create kind of a human readable explanation for those. So a simple example, if you have one attribute called, let me see, the level or something. So you can have 1, 2, and 3, which would be low, medium, and high. Maybe the value inside there is 1, 2, 3, but anyone who uses the visualization is not necessarily going to know that 1 means low. It could mean high as well, so it's hard to know. So you could map those. You could say, okay, if my source value is 1, I want that to be low. If it's 2, I want it to be medium, and 3 should be high. So you can create human readable values or representations of your data. It's also good for fixing things like spelling mistakes. So if someone spelled Manhattan with 3 T's, you can come in here and map that as well. So it's all cleaned up. So for this one, I'm just going to do a single mapping there just to fix up the Bronx there. And for my output here, instead of writing back out to shapefile, since I'm working with Tableau on the other side, I'm going to use one of our native writers in FME, the Tableau data extract writer. So to show that one, so the values in here, so once I've added that writer, so it's the TDE here, I can decide how I want that file to be created. And what's nice in here is that the TDE format has support or native support for geometry. So I can just create a geometry column to store the information about those borough boundaries. So I can run this and create that file. And if I open that up, I now have my borough boundaries TDE. I created a workbook in advance connected to this just to speed things up a little bit. So I'm going to go cooking show style here, and I'll open up the end result. So we'll say I've opened up that TDE. There we go. And so I've just colored this. So I've got those two data sources, and I've brought them in together, and I've linked them based on the borough name and the borough. And then here I can now create visualizations where I can use that geometry that I imported and connect that with my, my filming locations. So I've just created a very simple density map here so I can see in the darker colors of the areas or the boroughs that have the most filming locations and the lighter ones have less. So I can see Manhattan is definitely a popular place for films. So if I'm going to New York, that's definitely where I want to be. Probably would be there anywhere. I think that's where all the tourist stuff is anyway too. And so using this data now, since I have these two data sets linked together, I can create more interesting visualizations. So if I wanted to be able to filter based on the borough just by looking at it, I click on one and see all the filming locations within that area. So it's a good, simple example of being able to kind of add different ways to see and interact with your data sets. So I've got one more example here. Part 2. So it's a little bit more of an advanced workflow. So in this case here, what I've got is I'm working with that list of filming locations again. And now I have a question where I want to find the closest subway station to each of these filming locations. So I want to go and visit these locations, but I'm not quite sure the best way to get there. So I want to create a visualization where I can see which filming locations I can get to from each subway station in New York. So I have this data set here, also from the Open Data site, that just has the locations of each of the subway stations. So this one's coming in as GeoJSON data. So I've connected to that. And first thing I want to do is be able to find each of those filming locations, that the closest station to each filming location. So that's easy to do visually. So if I was to inspect both of these data sets, let me just disable some of my workflow here. I can bring these up in a map, and I can see the colors are a little bit hard to distinguish. If I make this magenta there, it'll stand out. So I can see each of the filming locations there in magenta. And if I look at this map, I can see basically which subway stations are pretty close. But if I wanted to create a visualization in something like Tableau or any of those other business intelligence tools, it's a little tricky. I have no easy way to link the filming location to my subway station. But using FME and some of our tools in there, I can actually link these two data sets by doing some spatial queries in there. So that's what I'm doing here in this workspace. Let me bring that up. So I'm using this transformer called the Verona Diagrammer. It's even hard to pronounce. Simply what this will do is it'll create a set of polygons around each of my subway stations that show the area of space that's closest to each of those input points. So I'm going to run this workflow, and I've recorded the data at each connection. So I'm just going to open up the Verona Diagrammer output to show you what it looks like. So it's a little ugly, as you can see, kind of when you get further out from the middle of New York. But generally, we wouldn't be using a subway to get to way over here, so we're probably OK there. If I come in closer, I can see each of these areas basically surrounds a single subway station and shows what area in the land is closest to that subway station based on what's around it. So it kind of creates this intricate mesh of areas. And each of these areas is tagged with the name of the subway station that is closest to that section of New York. So what I want to do now is join my two data sets based on where they are. So I want to find each of the filming locations that's inside each of these areas. So I'm using a transformer called the Point on Area Overlayer to do that. So it's going to find where my filming location points overlap with my subway station areas. And then for my outputs here, I'm creating two different TDE files. So again, I'm going out to Tableau, so I'll write to TDE. If I was doing another business intelligence tool, I could write out to Excel or some kind of database that they support, or really any data format that I'd like to use with those. So I'm just using an attribute manager here to clean up some of the column names, just to make it easier to create my visualizations and link them together. So the column names in this case are all common here. And so what I've done is I've created one output showing just the subway stations, and I've added a new field here called, there we are, number of filming locations. So this is the number of points that, or the number of film points that are close to that station. So I know, based on the station, how many filming areas I can go and see from that one station. So I can create a visualization to see which stations have the most potential for covering the most number of films. The other output I created here is for each of my movie locations, I've drawn a line from that movie location to the closest subway station. So I'm creating kind of a spider map showing lines coming out from a single station, showing all the different locations that are close to it. So I'm using this transformer called the Vertex Creator to add a new point. So I'm taking the subway station location and adding a point. So the input point is the filming location, and I'm adding a second point called the subway station to create a line. So 2 points equals a line to show the connection between those. So I've run this already, and I have my 2 TDE files now. So I've got my station to location lines, as well as my subway station points with the number of filming locations close by. So again, I'll just open up a workbook that I've already created that use those 2 data sets that I've built using FME here. So this is my first little example. So this is just a simple dashboard I've created that shows on the left here, shows the station name, and I've created a different size bubble based on the number of filming locations that are close by. So I can see at a glance here which stations have access to the most possible filming locations. So if I click here on this station, I can see from 72nd Street here all the different filming locations I could see from here. So if I wanted to go find where they filmed a scene at Breakfast at Tiffany's, I can go to the station. So it looks like the station has 2 exits on it. So I can come out both ways and see all these different filming locations. So West Side Story here has 2 from that one station. So I can click around and see kind of where the station is and where the filming locations are for there. If I deselect, I can see them all and kind of see what this diagram shows so that I can access from each of the stations in the middle there. And then there's a lot I can do with these different outputs. Uh-oh. Okay, broke my dashboard. Okay, I'll just leave that alone for now, but there's a few other dashboards in here that I've built based on that data, which I apparently overwrote. But now, because I have these data sets linked together, I can work on seeing kind of the stations in relation to those filming locations and kind of just add value to my visualizations and bring it all together there. So quick recap when it comes to spatial data. So if you're dealing with trying to do spatial joins where you have 2 data sets that maybe don't have a common ID necessarily, but you need to be able to link based on where they are in relation to each other. Something like the point on area overlayer is a great transformer for that. So we saw that in action. One good use case I've seen this for is particularly in the business kind of sense is when people have custom sales territories and they want to find out which customers fall within those. They're redefining boundaries in that. It's a good way just to make sure those 2 data sets overlap and to get good coverage and link them. The neighbor finder is a good transformer as well. So this is a nice one for finding when your 2 data sets are close together, but they don't necessarily overlap exactly. You can find the closest points to a specific area from there. So I could have made use of this for my workflow as well for the subway stations if I wanted to find which points were within, say, 5 meters of a particular subway station. I could use something like that. And then over here for creating points, lines, and areas, if you have tabular data and it has some information in there you could use to add a location to your data, these are good transformers for that. So you have the GeoCoder that can make use of a variety of different geocoding services to take your address data and create points. The Vertex Creator is good for taking kind of latitude and longitudes and creating an actual point from those. Or something like the line builder when you have maybe a series of points and you want to connect them together. I've seen this used with, say, like GPS tracking. So you have a series of points that follow a path and you want to connect that so you have a line to show what path was followed by maybe a delivery truck or something like that. So that brings us to the end of kind of the demos and the material we had to cover today. So we'll do some additional information about additional resources there. So if you're interested kind of in the data prep side, especially for tabular data, we've also got another webinar for dealing with Excel specifically. It has some really good examples about automating data processing and some other data validation workflows. So that's a good one to take a look at.
Yeah, there was also an ebook written for this webinar today. So now there's a data prep tips for business intelligence platforms. Should be live if you click on the link. It should also be on our blog probably this afternoon.
Yeah, brand new there. So
yep,
definitely worth checking out.
And there's also all the Tableau articles that were created for the user conference this last spring. which is all on the FME Knowledge Center. So if you're really interested in Tableau or more of the spider diagrams, all the how-to on how to do that is up in there.
Yeah, so we have a few more advanced kind of workflows with that. A lot of that, the information covered in that tutorial actually would apply to any of the business intelligence tools. Tableau is one that we've worked with a lot here because we have the Tableau writer directly, but the other ones will work too, so you can write out to formats that those tools will also support. So thank you very much for joining us today. So it looks like we've come right up to the end. So we've got a couple extra minutes. So if anyone has any questions, we can stick around a little while and answer a few. But otherwise, that's it for content today.
Yeah, thank you. I've just been watching the questions panel, and a couple questions came up about why I didn't use the feature merger in my demo as opposed to the database joiner. I just wanted to make sure I highlighted the database joiner because you can do a lot more with joining to databases like Oracle or SQL Server or Postgres. So I just wanted to make sure to highlight that. Everybody kind of knows what the feature merger is and how to use it. It's very kind of straightforward, but the database joiner seems a little bit more daunting at times.
Yeah, and one key difference between those two transformers, I'm going to jump into Workbench because I've got it here. So feature merger here. Oops. Where'd it go? And the database joiner. You'll see that the database joiner has only a single input port and the feature merger has two. So what the database joiner does is it takes your input data set and then based on how you want to join, it'll send a query out to the database or to the format you're connecting to and only grab in the data that matches your join conditions. So this one it's nice, it's efficient. So if you've got an Oracle database with 10 million records and you have 5 records coming in from a CSV file and you just want to grab some of that data from your Oracle database, this will be this will be quite fast because it'll use the optimization of your database just to pull in the records that you need. So you only actually pull 5 records from your database there. The feature merger, it's not quite as efficient as that database joiner, but it requires you to read in all, say, 10 million records from your Oracle database. Then it'll compare it with each of the records from your other database that you want to join that to. So this will join. The output will be the same in the end, but it's a lot more efficient to use the database joiner if you're dealing with big data sets. The feature merger is really good if you have 2 readers in your workspace anyway and you want to be able to kind of merge 2 streams of data together in your workflow. Okay, so if there's any questions, we can maybe give another couple of minutes there. Do we have anything? So we've got one question about the database joiner. Does it run the query for each feature from the input or once for all features? That's a good question. I'm actually not 100% sure about the inner workings of this one. I suspect it'll be once for each. We could probably follow up on that question to confirm that for sure.
All the business intelligence platforms we used Qlik, which is a cloud-based platform, Power BI, which is a Microsoft product, and Tableau, which you can all write up to the cloud. Every one of them offers cloud features for sharing data.
Yeah, so we kind of wanted to give kind of a broad range of the tools out there. We didn't really want to focus on one specific one too much. So yeah, each of our demos was a different tool. So we got another question here. Much use of BI platforms is now to reveal intelligence on what is happening right now based on live streaming data. How does FME help here? Oh, that's a good question. So kind of depends on what type of data your live stream is. So what FME can help with is kind of being able to connect to that data wherever it is. So FME has lots of tools for being able to find data on the web. Liz showed the HTTP Caller. So this is an interesting one. So if you've got, say, data that is live from some kind of a web application, you can use this to make queries and get the latest copy of the data and maybe write that out to a cache so you can use kind of a cached version of that data set and update that as frequently as you need. So that's one option there. A lot of our readers will connect directly to whatever your data source is. So there's a lot of web-based readers in FME as well, so you can read in whatever the most recent version of your data set is, do all your validation and cleanup on that data set, and then again, write it out to wherever you want your business intelligence tool to connect to that. So you can create kind of extracts from that and update the data as changes happen.
You can also use FME Server to automate this process.
Yeah, that's a good point. So one thing we didn't cover much was the FME Server product. Yeah, that provides lots of tools for being able to automatically extract information from a source when changes happen. So we have things like the directory watcher in the server, which when a file is updated in a particular folder, you can have a workspace like this one run as soon as that change happens and comes through. So you can take advantage of those changes. We can schedule workflows if you want this to run every 5 minutes as your data changes and fix up and update your data source. You can totally do that as well.
I think that's all we have time for today.
Okay.
So,
great.
sure, our experts will follow up with the rest of the questions that came in.
Yeah, and if anyone's asking about recordings for this webinar, it is recorded. And I believe we'll be sending out an email after the webinar. So I see that went out in the chat as well. So have no fear, you'll get the link as soon as we make that available.
And the workspaces should be available online eventually.
Yeah, so we'll be publishing those as well. Yeah. Okay, well, thank you again. Thanks very much for joining us today. I hope this webinar has been useful. So
thank you.
Yeah. Goodbye for now.